Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast, joining us today from CBS Sports, SiriusXM, and here courtesy of Betonline is Danny Kanell. We talk about one of Danny's favorite things, SEC bias, and we look at this weekend's spreads in the Big 12. That's all coming up.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Josh Neighbors here, your host. Danny Kanell is joining us. Danny, how are we doing? I know you're just like the busiest person in the world between traveling for CBS Sports. You've got the two radio shows, double the Dusty twice a day. We and I both worked Dusty a good bit, so I know that can be. And Cover 3 going on. Like, how are we doing mid-season, October 26th?
It's good. It's flying by. That's probably the thing I noticed the most is how fast it goes by. Like when you don't have a spare minute in the day, literally from 7 a.m. when I start to sometimes I do, like on Monday night, I do Monday Night Football with CBS Sports HQ, and I don't get off till half. Like, so it's 10 o'clock at night and you just don't have a minute to breathe. But it's the best, man. I got the greatest job in the world. I just get to talk about ball, every day, all day. My daughters sometimes think it's a little annoying. I get tired of the sound of my own voice sometimes. But hey, I got 3 weddings to pay for eventually down the road. So I got to do as much as I can while I can.
Yeah, maybe more than 3, right?
Yeah,
I have to think so.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so I have this. There's this clip that's been going around, and I'm sure you've seen it. Our colleague at SiriusXM, Peter Burns, had some comments about the SEC. Not sure if our listeners have seen it, so I'm going to play it. This was on SEC this morning. Either on Monday or Tuesday, but here's the clip for everybody out there.
I'm so sick and tired of us like pretending that other conferences are as good as the SEC, right? I'm so sick and tired of pretending that TCU could hold a candle right now to Alabama or to Georgia or to Tennessee. And yet I'm supposed to feel that way. UCLA, if they keep undefeated, the Pac-12 is supposed to be there. Why the hell should they be? The Pac-12 is a joke of a conference compared to the SEC. You look at recruiting rankings, you look at the amount of success in the past, you look at the guys that are going to be coming off of rosters to play in the NFL. And I mean, I'm supposed to think that an undefeated UCLA team could go blow for blow with Georgia?
No, but what about Oregon? Oregon's already been blown out by Georgia.
Well, we've seen that once right now.
So, full disclosure, you and I both work with these people in different capacities. Chris Doring, love Peter Burns. Like, I worked that show a decent amount as well. Love them. They're great people. But, Danny, this to me is, I hate to say this kind of stuff, but like, this is the kind of talk that I think is really not constructive for the sport. Not to be like, soft Mr. Big 12, but like, I'm not sure how helpful this kind of stuff is. Like, we should just play in our own sandbox because they really aren't worthy to play in our sandbox kind of talk.
No, it's ridiculous. It's really, and I like Peter Burns a lot, and I would tell him to this face, he's the biggest SEC shill there is out there. He's paid by the SEC network. Like, he is their PR guy. He's their hype man. I mean, that's truly what he is, and he does a great job at it. And guess what? He's got a pretty good product to hype, right? Because there's a lot, some of those arguments he makes are really good. Like, hey, we do churn out the most NFL players. We have had this run of national championships. So it is. And I the thing that bothers me the most is the arrogance about it, acting like other conferences aren't even in the same stratosphere. Because if you said to me, who do you think is the best conference? I'd say, first of all, well, how would you define that? Is it the most national title contenders? And I'd probably say, yeah, it's probably the SEC. But if you said the deepest conference, and we might be talking about the Big 12, that has, it from top to bottom, every game is entertaining, which actually hurts the conference because they might not have that elite team to get to the playoffs. The other thing, when he's like, who is UCLA to be on the same field with Georgia? Who is in the SEC that's on the same playing field as Georgia? It sure isn't South Carolina. It still isn't Auburn. It's still not a lot of programs that they face within their conference. So if the conference is so great top to bottom, why are their own teams getting blown out by the Georgia Bulldogs and Alabama? Like, it happens every single year. Yes, they have some programs that are super loaded and super stacked, but it doesn't mean that they're this untouchable, unbelievable, force of college football that is just, you can't compete with, because the course of history will tell you it's not. And I mean, I could go off on this for a half an hour, Josh. Like, it's very annoying because, and he came in pounding the table because they had 7 teams ranked in the top 25. And like, let's go look at some of those teams and dive in. They absolutely, and it's because they have a hype train that's not only Peter Burns, it's also ESPN, it's also the SEC network that hypes up the conference. So you come in with most teams ranked in the preseason top 25. You continue that throughout the year so that when a team like South Carolina, they got blown out by Arkansas earlier this year. They got blown out by Georgia, but they beat, Kentucky with their backup quarterback, I'll remind you. And Kentucky, by the way, is still Kentucky. Like, let's not act like that's beating Alabama or Georgia. Right. And then they beat Texas A&M, who, by the way, is 3-4. And I talked to Shane Beamer this morning on the radio show, and he's like, we beat Kentucky and Texas A&M. And it's a great story. But those are not marquee wins that you should be touting as, oh, this should make us a top 25 team. The only reason they are ranked is because they are in the SEC. I could go on. I mean, every team is overranked. And then it's this like cycle that helps.
It just feeds itself, right? It just keeps feeding itself. Yeah.
Every win is better and every loss isn't as bad as every other conference is. So it helps all of them.
So it's funny you mentioned this because I'm Missouri graduate. I was at Missouri Auburn this year. And I was talking to my friends I was at the game with. I was like, this game's awful. But like, you think about the idea for Missouri to go to Jordan-Hare and beat Auburn, despite how bad Auburn is still a big deal. And like, that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about here that kind of feeds itself, right? Like, South Carolina beat Texas A&M. That's important for them. That's important for Shane Beamer when it comes to recruiting. Beating Kentucky is important for them when it comes to recruiting and stuff like that. But it's not impressive. Everybody's like, this 4-game winning streak. South Carolina's ranked and they're 5-point favorites at home against Missouri.
Right.
So like, how good are we talking here? Like, how good is that team? And same thing goes for Kentucky. And I think you mentioned like the Big 12 top to bottom, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it is a more competitive league. And I think the problem is the SEC is like, it's so playoff focused, right? Mm-hmm. It's so playoff focused. It's like, all right, we've gotten the 2 teams. Can we get to 3? Can we go in that direction now? And like, it becomes this thing where it's like, well, to get to 3, we have to demean other conferences, right? We have to make sure that they don't think those conferences are as important. And I think that's part of this process is being like, all right, well, we have to hype ourselves up. And I think it goes to the Big 12's point of like, look, I'm not sure we have a team in the playoff, but the good news about a 12-team playoff is that the most competitive league in the entire country is the Big 12, in my opinion. I think there's like, you put West Virginia in the SEC or the ACC Coastal, they probably win it, or come close. That league should have a say in who is the eventual national champion. They should have a team represented, right? NFL, it's kind of like this. Like the NFC East is the best league, top to bottom. They should definitely have a team in the playoffs. Now, would I favor them over the Bills or the Chiefs right now? No, but do they deserve a spot there? Yes, because it's such a competitive, deep league. That's really, really good. And the NFL rewards that. And I'm glad college is going to reward that. But I hate right now in the 4-team playoff, we're at a point where we got to demean the other leagues to help prop up the SEC. And I think it's a problem. Also, I don't agree with the TCU not holding a candle with Alabama comment. Texas with the backup quarterback gave him a game. So exactly.
And don't say it about Tennessee either, because I'd love to see TCU's offense versus Tennessee's defense.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Very good. And it probably might have played out just like Alabama and Tennessee. You would have seen a lot of points. A shootout would have been a fun game. Why'd you set me off this morning, Josh? Because now I'm getting my blood pressure's like.
Well, the more I'm thinking
DK,
about this is why I did it. I knew you'd love this.
I know you points that you're bringing up. Like, for example, Alabama versus Tennessee. What was the final score? 52-49. What would we have heard just 6 or 7 years ago if you saw a Texas-Oklahoma shootout or a Texas-Texas Tech or any Big 12 matchups? Oh, look at that. Awful. That's horrendous. Look at that. No defense. Nobody plays defense out in that conference. And all the while, when I was at ESPN, I'm pointing this out saying, do you realize these offensive schemes are light years of face? Well, the SEC was still facing, 3 yards and a pile of dust. Like that's what they were facing. The quarterback play in the SEC was atrocious. You had great quarterback play in the Big 12. And I'm like, that's a reason why these defenses are struggling. And even this year, I want you to notice something, because there are some teams that are winning kind of ugly. Illinois is one of them. Syracuse is winning ugly. And when you watch Illinois play, watch people make fun of them because they only kick field goals and they only punt, and it's a low-scoring, ugly, run-based offense, play great defense. Did we not see that, which was, hyped up as the game of the century when LSU and Bama played to a 9-6 game, which was gross. It was so bad offensively. The quarterback play was horrendous. Do we ever hear that? Like people mocking those offenses? No. What do we hear about? Oh, these defenses. Look at all these NFL talent on this field. Like that same NFL talent is on the field for Alabama and Tennessee. Why aren't they playing this great defense we always hear about? Because you finally got good quarterback play and you got offensive schemes that are up to snuff with the rest of college football.
And where did that offensive scheme come from Tennessee?
From the Big 12.
From the Big 12, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting. I think also too, like you're seeing this right now, and I'm not saying these guys are awesome. Like Skylar Thompson's playing the NFL, right?
Yeah.
Bailey Zapp. I know he's not a Big 12 quarterback, but guess where the offensive coordinator, Zach Kitley, is? He's Texas Tech's offensive coordinator. Sam Ellinger is getting his chance to play. Now he's a little bit different quarterback, but like Patrick Mahomes is there. I think
Kyler Murray.
Yeah, Kyler Murray. Yeah, Baker's not as great, but like you're getting all these guys. Baker Mayfield, right? A lot of them came from this league. So it is. Yeah, they demeaned it. They said it was 7-on-7. I mean, we saw Ole Miss and Auburn played a 42-30 or whatever it was. They were shooting it out the other week too.
And how about Jalen Hurts, who was, okay at Alabama? He goes to Oklahoma, showcases what he can do offensively. And then from that experience at Oklahoma playing in the Big 12, he gets discovered to go get an opportunity to play with the Eagles and have an incredible season with them.
Stop talking shit about the Big 12 people. I hate the him where he was like TCU can't hold. I can't. And I'm like,
I know it's
what
ridiculous.
is Alabama's defense showing us? That team is 1-man team. That is a 2-man team. I'll get
you will hear this because they will use this to try to keep Oregon out of the playoff because Oregon got beat 49-3. They'll use it against TCU or a Big 12 to whoever's playing the Big 12 championship. They couldn't hold a handle to Georgia because Georgia is impressive. But guess what? And maybe they would be a 3-touchdown favorite. That's why you play the games. Georgia was a 28-point favorite against Missouri, and Missouri had them on the ropes in the fourth quarter. They were like a 30-point favorite against Kent State. They were trailing at halftime. Every team is beatable in college football, but if you put these teams on a pedestal and we treat them like they're untouchable, which drives me nuts because it does become the narrative. We do it with the top tier, right? We use that term tier. Ohio State, Bama, Georgia, we came in. Oh, no one can touch them. They're unbeatable. Let's just put them in the playoff. And then we actually see them get challenged and we're shocked. No, it's college football. Anybody can get beat on any day. I don't care if it's Georgia, Ohio State, Bama, Tennessee. Pick your team, Michigan in the top 5. Anybody can get beat. It's why we need more teams in the playoff. But if you have a monopoly on it and half the time you get 50% of the playoffs, which is what the SEC does oftentimes, then you're going to rattle off all these national championships they keep referencing.
Yeah. And it would be interesting this year because I think you're right. I think one of those top 4 teams would probably get caught against somebody else. I mean, you play 4 quarterfinal games. Yeah. Those top 4, I think somebody gets caught and kind of disrupts.
And you get a better Final Four. Like last year, Michigan got exposed, right? I mean, they didn't look championship ready. And maybe if they play that game 10 times, but maybe there's a team that just missed out. Who was 5th last year? I think
it was. And who was it? Ended up being number 5 last year.
But but even the 5, 6, 7, or 8 spot, maybe those teams are coming into their own, and they might be a better matchup. Will you figure those things out?
Ohio State was 5, right? Ohio State maybe 5.
I think so. Yeah. So then and they might have been a better matchup against Georgia, and maybe it would have been a rematch of the Ohio State Michigan in the earlier round. Then you kind of weed out some of the pretenders. And if you get a blowout, you blow out. Like, who cares? We see it in the NFL. It doesn't impact the greatness of the product and the atmosphere that's going to be out there.
Yeah, I also think that the calendar being like more condensed. I mean, the month between games is just
it's stupid.
It really actually hurts the game, I think, just because like the amount of game planning you get to do every single day. It's not how actual football goes. It's week to week. All right, let's look at some of these spreads this week in the Big 12. I did a little digging before this, Danny, and I realized that Big 12 only has 4 games this week, but it's the only league where all of its games are 1-score spreads. The ACC, your ACC, does have 4 games that are 1-score spreads. So shout out to them for having competitiveness. So here is the week 9 Big 12 action. Oklahoma at Iowa State, TCU, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Baylor, and Texas Tech. But my guy, Jimmy Shapiro, our guy sent me these spreads last night, Danny. Mm-hmm. All of them have moved. All of these, all of them are different numbers than what he sent us when it actually happened. So when you look at these right here, which game catches your eye the most and which spread catches your eye the most? they can be the same game. If that's
so. I think the TCU West Virginia is a very intriguing line because you're like, wait a second, TCU is the 7th best team in the country. West Virginia is all the way down at the bottom. I think they're second to last in the Big 12 rankings. And you're like, that should be a bigger spread, right? TCU is supposed to be dominant. I'll tell you this, Josh, and this is more of a compliment to the depth of the league. I don't trust any team over a touchdown or even around 6.5. I think it's settled at 6.5 now, whatever it is.
7.5, right? When I checked this morning,
7.5. I love taking the Mountaineers, and they've been up and down. They've been hard to figure out. They had a really good win against Baylor, and you're like, all right, Neil Brown saved his job. They're going to be off to the races. And then they get blown out against Texas Tech.
And he lost his job again.
Yeah, exactly. And he might have.
Now he can get it back this week against
exactly,
TCU.
which you can. But I think Morgantown at night will be a hostile environment. And I do think that I like the Mountaineers to cover that one. And TCU, I think it's more about what is becoming the Big 12. And this happens in all of college football. But, man, it really feels like it's on display in the conference. It's a battle like the last man standing. You've got teams banged up, injuries, especially at quarterback. And we talk about another one of these games. But TCU's been through this gauntlet where they've been impressive and they've passed all these tests. But if Kansas State didn't have quarterback issues last week, they probably lose that game. I think they come in a little bit wounded in this one, banged up. And I think, and maybe they win, but I don't think they win by more than a touchdown. So I like West Virginia in that one. Another one off the radar I kind of like, Oklahoma. I think, the 3-game losing skid was tough, right? And Brent Venables, all the question marks around the program. But you got to look at what Dylan Gabriel means to that offense. And they were without him for a significant amount of time, and it showed on the field. But when he's healthy, I still think they have the talent and the offensive weapons to overwhelm Iowa State, who is one of the better defenses, if not the best defense in the conference. But ultimately, I think Oklahoma will go there a little bit more desperate, but I think they got back some of their mojo getting off the schneid last week against Kansas. So I think they win and cover the 1-point spread. It's essentially a pick 'em. I think they'll win by a field goal or more in that one. So, and then the other game with Kansas State, Oklahoma State, you talk about a battle of attrition. Like, who is left standing here? Yeah. Right. This one, to me, I would probably wait to play until it gets closer to game time to see what's the deal with Adrian Martinez. Only played one series last week. Then they went to Will Howard, who also got banged up, down to their third quarterback. If Adrian Martinez, now this is a risk you run if you wait. If Adrian Martinez is cleared and all of a sudden you find out, oh, he's going to play, then I like Kansas State a lot in this position. And it's not a knock against Oklahoma State, because that was one of the more impressive wins of the weekend last week when they came from behind against Texas. And they're a very veteran team, but they're also a team which has been getting banged up with injuries all across the board. I mean, Spencer Sanders, was he going to play last week or not? He actually ended up playing. He played great in that game. But I think it's just sort of the gauntlet that you have to run. It's funny because we only use that term about some other conferences about how tough it is. But it is a gauntlet that Oklahoma State has been through, and they only failed one of those tests on the road at TCU, which was a tough game for them. But it started with Baylor, Texas Tech, on the road at TCU, big win last week against Texas. Now they got to go on the road. If Kansas State, if Adrian Martinez is healthy, I think that brings some big problems for the Cowboys. So I would take Kansas State and lay those points.
Yeah, I think the word is Thursday. So tomorrow is when we're going to hear they're going to have him go. And, he's just not practicing right now. So we'll see. But, I mean,
as long as it's under a field goal, like, again, I don't trust many teams in the Big 12. Like, with more than, like, if it's over 6, I'm taking the dog every time. Right. And I would expect it might probably go up 2.5, 3 points. As long as it's under a field goal, I like Kansas State.
Danny, I took West Virginia last week plus 4.5. And I mean, and there were Texas Tech fans who were asking for apologies. They were like, you should apologize for what you said. I want to ask you, though, quickly about the TCU aspect of this, because I think a lot of people have been talking about, are they dirty, or, they got a problem with injuring quarterbacks. When I watch them play, like, every team they're playing is getting injured. You go back to the Kansas game, guys are going down left and right, and they're a big physical team. I was staying at a hotel in Kansas City for a wedding right when they were coming in for the KU game, and I was like, oh my God, these guys, it looks like a basketball team they got walking in there. As somebody who played, like, are there teams like this that just can, I mean, I guess kind of the older Alabama teams we were mentioning too, right? They're just kind of kicking everybody's ass. And people talk about Kaz Kazadi, their strength and conditioning coach. People are just sending me pictures of him on Twitter, just his shot from the team website being like, this is why, this is why, this is why. I mean, they're kind of just leaving a trail of bodies in their path, and like, they're not really banged up. Kind of talk about teams like that and like the I guess, dirty stigma around those teams.
Right. I think especially in today's game, you see teams that probably play a little bit harder than some, and maybe that comes from the coaches, from the defensive coordinators. And I don't think it's dirty, although I do think they hit on Dylan Gabriel.
That was bad. Jamoy,
that was dirty.
Yeah.
That was dirty as it gets, and I thought that was unwarranted. And I actually think in some of those, I hate targeting. I hate that it's the ultimate penalty is you get tossed from a game.
Right.
And I actually think college football has done a good job of reviewing them and taking them off if it's not truly targeting. But I also think on the other side, if you see hits like that one that are dirty and do look there is an intent to harm or injure, I would have no problem if there was a multiple game suspension, like 2 games. If you really want to worry about player safety, let's try to eliminate those. But back to your question, I do think some teams are probably taught and are more scared from their coaches. We really don't want to lose you. We really don't want that roughing the passer penalty or you losing you for a game and getting tossed out for the targeting call. And there are other teams who are willing to take that risk and say, you know what, if we get the penalty, so be it. We want to play physical. And I don't know. I haven't talked to him about TCU staff. I don't know if that's the case. Maybe it is, but I think inevitably you would see that across the country, that some teams play a little bit harder, toe that line a little bit closer and are willing to take that risk. And there's it's just kind of the breaks of college football and the breaks of concussions where we get those players off the field. The minute we see a sign, the minute we see a symptom, the minute we see a player shake his head, he's out of the field. He's off the field for the rest of the game. And, if you are playing that way and you're getting away with some of them, then you go ahead and you take advantage of it. And maybe that's part of it too. Other could just be bad luck for the teams that TCU is playing.
Yeah, I think it's a little combination of both. But I'm with you on that hit. It should have been a multiple game suspension for sure on that one.
Yep.
All right, Danny, I'll get you out of here. Where can people find you and all of the work that you do?
I talk all the time. It's hard not to hear me on SiriusXM 7 to 9 with Dusty Dvorak on ESPNU radio. And then in the afternoons, noon to 3, we do everything, NFL, NBA, all sports, if you like that, on Mad Dog Sports Radio. And then on the Cover 3 podcast as well with CBS Sports HQ.
Are you going to be talking about Suns Warriors today?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Getting into it with Clay.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. We talk about everything. That's all I do is just pretty much watch sports and talk about them. It's crazy.
That's awesome. All right, Danny, appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much.
You got it, Josh.